Part 1. You ever get that feeling someone's watching? Victoria eased up to me with a grin, then slipped something unrecognizable into my glass the instant she thought I wasn't looking. I made this one just for you. My favorite son-in-law, she chirped, her smile too bright under the chandelier's glow. I managed a nod, murmured thanks, then in one smooth move traded her glass for Richard's. He'd been dogging my career since day one. 45 minutes later, I realized I'd never officially introduced myself. I'm Mason Carter, 32, and I scrape by as a freelance shooter, weddings, landscapes, editorial spreads for small magazines, basically whatever keeps the rent paid in Asheville. Against all odds, I'm damn good at it. But around Victoria and Richard, my camera is just a toy, never serious enough. So when's this little hobby of yours going to turn into a real job? Richard would bark over lasagna at every Sunday dinner, leaning back to flash his Rolex, the way bankers do when they're about to lecture you. Meanwhile, Victoria fussed over Emma's napkin, smoothing its edges as if my presence might wrinkle the fabric of their perfect world. Emma squeezed my hand under the table, her silent way of saying, "I'm sorry. I'd just flown in from a week chasing bison through thigh-deep snow in Montana for a National Geographic assignment. My cheeks burned raw from wind, my boots packed with ice. Emma insisted we couldn't skip her mom's birthday dinner. Just 2 hours, she promised. I should have heeded that tight knot in my gut. Mason, darling, let me help with these trays, Victoria said in the kitchen, her eyes flicking left and right like she was hiding something. Her hand trembled as she thumbed open a tiny vial. She leaned in, voice low, "Special sangria for you." Something about the way the liquid caught the light told me it wasn't just fruit juice. But I shrugged it off, didn't realize how badly I'd wish I'd paid attention. Emma and I met 6 years ago at a downtown gallery opening, my photos lining the walls, her master's thesis in environmental science fresh off the printer. She loved how I hunted moments through my lens. I worshipped her drive to save what I captured. But her parents? They'd pictured a daughter married to a desk jockey, someone with a stable pension and a company car. In other words, a man exactly like Richard. Victoria's compliments always came with a catch. "Mason, your images are lovely. When do you plan to get a proper job?" She'd host barbecues and introduce me as the photographer, never my son-in-law. Year after year, I tried to impress them. Fine wine, magazine covers, name-dropping big clients. None of it stuck. They still saw me as a phase. Last Christmas, I overheard Victoria on the phone. Emma could have married Jonathan. You know, orthopedic surgeon, family money. Instead, she picked the artsy guy. Her pause on artsy stung like an accusation. When Emma and I said we were trying for a baby, Richard pulled me aside. "Kids are expensive, son. Maybe get a real gig before you bring one into the world." I never told Emma, didn't want her trapped between her parents and me. So I kept smiling, shook Richard's hand extra firmly, praised Victoria's cooking, and swallowed every cutting remark. But signs were everywhere. Victoria forgetting to count me in family photos, Richard joking about Emma's impulsive life choices and looking straight at me when he said it. I chalked it up to time. I thought eventually they'd soften. I was wrong. On the Friday of Victoria's birthday, I rolled in from Montana, face windburned and boots crunchy with snow. My memory card held images that'd cover our mortgage for months. I changed out of my parka, buttoned a crisp shirt, and we headed to their colonial-style house in the nicest part of town. Dinner kicked off like any other. Richard bragged about a deal, Victoria fussed over the napkins, Luke and Mia made small talk. I nursed a beer, counting down each tick of the clock. After the main course, Victoria announced dessert, her famed sangria, and slipped away to the kitchen. I offered to haul the glasses in, and that's when I saw it. 2 glasses set apart from the rest, and Victoria quietly dropping something from a vial into one of them. No color, no smell, just a shimmer on the surface. She hid the vial the moment I cleared the doorway. "Oh, Mason, I've got it. This one's yours." My throat tightened. I grabbed both glasses. She whisked away before I could ask a question. Richard barely looked up from his phone as I slid the doctored sangria in front of him. I told everyone I preferred water with dessert and watched Richard drain the glass. Part 2. My heart skipped when I heard that first heave. 45 minutes after they cleared plates, Richard dashed for the bathroom, face ashen, sweat beading his brow. The harsh sounds of his sickness pounded through the hallway. Victoria's eyes widened. She clutched the edge of the tablecloth and met my gaze, an unspoken admission that she'd tried to poison me, and that I knew it. I said nothing. I didn't shout across the room or demand answers. I merely lifted my fork and took another bite of chocolate cake while Emma bolted down the hall to her father's side. Must have been something in the scallops, Richard wheezed, clutching the sink. Victoria stammered about bad shellfish. I slipped the untouched glass she'd prepared into my jacket pocket, storing evidence while a cold clarity settled in my chest. I wasn't going to wage a public confrontation. I was going to win this quietly. Monday morning, I handed the glass to Jason, an old client who'd pivoted into forensic toxicology. Family matter, I'd said. 3 days later, his phone call confirmed it. Benzodiazepines, enough to knock someone out and scramble their memory, but not kill. I thanked him, requested a formal report, and said nothing else. That evening, I told Emma we'd skip her parents' dinner. I need to prep for an exhibition, I fibbed. She sighed but agreed, her trust in me unshaken. Over the next 2 weeks, I dug into Victoria's history, 3 Xanax prescriptions, each exceeding recommended doses. Neighbors whispered about her strange fits at club events and rumors of missing jewelry. I printed every scrap of paper, prescriptions, rumors, lab notes, and stashed it all in a manila folder. Then came my opening. Emma breezed into my studio one afternoon. Mom wants new profile photos, she said, eyebrows raised. She clearly hadn't realized poison might be on the menu. Saturday, I arrived alone at their colonial house, camera bag in one hand, sealed folder in the other. Victoria greeted me with a polite smile, designer dress, flawless makeup, while Richard was at the office. I placed the folder on her polished desk. Before we start, I said quietly, you'll want to see this. Her eyes flicked to the lab report, then the prescription printouts. Her hands trembled. This is absurd, she whispered. We both know what happened, I replied. You slipped benzos into my drink, hoping I'd miss my big opening and prove I'm not good enough for Emma. Victoria's lips writhed. It was never about you, just a lesson. I let that hang, then laid out my terms. You'll confess to Richard. You'll tell him exactly what you did. And from now on, you'll treat me with respect, not because you suddenly see my worth, but because if you don't, Emma will learn everything. Her laugh was brittle. She'd never believe me over you. Perhaps, I said, shouldering my bag, but she'll believe the lab report, the prescriptions, and the neighbors you've wronged. Then I walked out without taking a single photo. That night, Victoria stormed the phone with Emma, spinning lies about my hostile behavior. When Emma confronted me, I laid every document on our kitchen island, the official toxicology report, the printed prescriptions, even text messages where Victoria's tone had soured over the years. Emma's voice shook. My mother wouldn't do something like that. I held her hand. The next morning, Emma drove to her parents alone. When she returned, her eyes were red. Dad says it's a misunderstanding, she whispered, that you're just insecure about your photography. I'd anticipated this, being the villain in my own story to protect our future. Over the following days, Emma retreated into silence, slipping out to her parents and returning with forced smiles that didn't reach her eyes. I buried myself in editing, hours in a dark room, fingers dancing over keys, hoping the storm would break. Then, one afternoon, our mailbox yielded a plain white envelope. No return address, only Mason Carter scrawled in unfamiliar handwriting. I stood in the driveway, folder in pocket, envelope in hand, realizing the real confrontation was just beginning. Part 3. The envelope felt heavier than any bomb I've ever dropped. I tore it open at my kitchen island and pulled out a plain USB stick and a note scribbled in Mia's familiar handwriting. You need to see this. My pulse kicked up a notch as I seated myself, closed the blinds, and slipped the drive into my laptop. A folder labeled Family Security appeared, overflowing with video files stamped the night of Victoria's birthday. I clicked the first clip, Victoria in their bright, pristine kitchen, back to the camera, carefully lifting a vial and tipping it into a glass. My own silhouette edged into view as I stepped through the doorway, carrying both glasses. The next shot showed Richard, head tilted back in mid-sip, draining the doctored sangria. I swallowed past a lump in my throat and moved to the next file. It began just after Emma and I had driven home. On loop, I watched Victoria roar at Richard in their living room, face flushed and hands clenched. How could you drink from the wrong glass? She screamed, voice sharp enough to cut through concrete. Richard's shoulders rose defensively. You know what you do, he shouted back, eyes flicking from her to the empty glass on the coffee table. This isn't the first time. My jaw ached from clenching as I replayed that exchange 3 times. Here was raw proof not only of Victoria's attempt to poison me, but of a history of manipulation she'd managed to keep hidden. A second folder, timestamped 2 days later, opened with footage of the couple pacing before that same living room fireplace. Victoria's tone was eerily calm. He knows, Richard, she whispered, leaning toward him, breath catching on the mic. He's seen the proof. Richard narrowed his eyes. So what? He drew a slow breath. It's his word against ours. Emma will blame you, and she'll believe us. Victoria's lips curved in a cold smile. Don't worry. She paused, flicking a page of notes she'd obviously prepared. I've already started weaving doubts into her mind. By Friday, she'll be ready to file for divorce, and convinced it was her idea. I jerked back from the screen, heart hammering. This wasn't just a one-off stunt. It was an organized scheme to strangle Emma's autonomy, to steer every branch of her future away from anyone who saw her as her own person. They'd been at this for years. I dialed Mia immediately. Why send me this? I demanded when she answered. Her voice trembled. They did the same thing after Luke and I married. For 2 years, I watched them undermine us, telling Luke I was unstable, that I shouldn't work, that I was too emotional. Why keep it from me? Luke worships Richard, she confessed. He trusted his father more than me. I tried to show him proof. I even brought a lawyer once, but he'd defend them blind. When I heard what happened to you, I couldn't stay silent. The next morning, Richard texted, "We need to talk. Man to man. No wives." He met me at his country club's private lounge, where the hush was punctuated by clinks of fine glassware. He sat at a mahogany table, bourbon swirling in his hand like dark ink. Sunlight slanted through stained glass, painting stripes across his pinstriped suit. "Mason," he began, voice low. "Family dynamics get messy. My wife, she only wants to protect Emma. I steeled myself. Poisoning me is protective?" I asked, chin tilted. He shrugged. "It was an accident. She's on anti-anxiety meds, just a mix-up." I slid the folder across the table. His face went still, hardening into something unrecognizable. "What do you want?" he asked, voice clipped. "Money? You married my daughter for her trust fund." I inhaled slowly. "No, I want you both to stop undermining our marriage. Stop telling Emma I'm not good enough. Leave us alone." Richard leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Ask Emma about Colin," he spat. "About her ex-fiancé before you showed up." My skin crawled. "What are you talking about?" "Colin Reed. Nice guy. Surgeon. Perfect match. But we convinced her he was cheating, planted evidence, edited texts. Took us 6 months to break them up. She came crying to me." He chuckled, a cold, distorted sound. "History repeats itself, son." On the drive home, I called Emma's college roommate, Bethany. "Tell me about Colin," I said softly. Bethany's voice broke. He adored her. They were happy. But her parents whispered lies in her ear. They even faked screenshots of him messaging other women. He tried to prove it was false, but Emma didn't trust him anymore. I pressed pause on that gut punch. The pattern was undeniable. Every person who encouraged Emma's independence was methodically erased. Instead of rushing to Emma, I gathered every piece of evidence I could find. Security footage, Jason's lab report, Victoria's prescription records, threatening texts she'd sent me, emails from Colin showing how she'd coached Emma to accuse him, and testimonies from friends who'd been quietly cut out of her life. With everything loaded onto a single USB drive, I invited Luke and Mia over for dinner, without Emma. I needed her family to confront their own reflection before she did. That evening, under the soft glow of pendant lights, we finished dessert. I connected my laptop to the TV, clearing my throat. "There's something you both need to see," I said, voice firm. For the next hour, we watched footage. Victoria dosing my drink, Richard shrugging it off, their whispered plans to sabotage Emma's relationships. Luke sat frozen, mouth slack, muttering this can't be them. Mia's tears glimmered on her cheeks. When the final clip ended, the room fell deathly silent. I turned toward the doorway. Emma stood there, drawn by our hushed voices. Her face went ashen as she registered the tail end of the video still flickering on the screen. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered, voice cracking. I closed the laptop gently and reached out to her. "Because you needed to see it yourself, not just what they did to me, but what they've been doing to you your entire life." Luke rose, anger flaring. "You edited these videos. My parents wouldn't." Mia grabbed his arm. "They did it to us too, Luke. After James was born, they convinced you I was reckless with money so you'd take the kids away." Emma's eyes, bright with betrayal, relief, fierce resolve all at once. She looked at me, voice steady. "Let's leave. Now." In that instant, I understood the real journey had just begun. walking out of the life she'd known and into the one she deserved together. Part 4. Owen's face went completely white. He sank into the armchair, voice barely above a whisper. You never told me. His fingers trembled on the fabric's edge. I tried to warn you. I did, but you wouldn't listen. That night, Emma climbed into bed beside me, moonlight pooling at her feet. She brushed her fingers through my hair. I need time to process this, she murmured, tears glinting in her eyes. But I believe you, and I'm sorry I ever doubted you. At dawn, my phone buzzed with Victoria's name. Emma answered on speaker. Sweetheart, Victoria cooed, voice too bright for the hour, your father and I worry about you. Marriage is challenging. Sometimes a little space brings clarity. Why don't you come stay with us a while? Emma's lip trembled. Mom, she said, then squared her shoulders. I've seen the videos. Silence crackled over the line. Finally, Victoria's tone flipped to icy calm. What videos? Emma held the phone out. Security footage of you dosing Julian's drink. Of you and Dad plotting to break up my marriage. Another pause. Victoria's voice returned, clipped and hard. You know Julian's always been jealous of our family. He's manipulated those clips. Emma's answer was steel. We're all coming tonight, Owen, Mia, Julian, and me. We need a real family conversation. No more lies. She hung up. Emma turned to me, eyes bright with determination. They'll deny it. They'll spin this on you. I nodded, slipping on my jacket. Let's give them the truth. By early evening, we arrived at Victoria and Richard's house. Lanterns glowed along the path. Winter wind tugged at our coats. Owen and Mia waited in the parlor, stiff as statues. Richard lounged nearby, legs crossed, arms folded, wearing his usual confident grin. I unpacked my camera and tripod. The soft click of the power button echoed. I'm recording this for the family archive. Victoria's gasp was immediate. This is private family business. Exactly, I said, flipping on the red recording light. Family business, and I am family, even if you've tried to erase me from the story. For 2 relentless hours, we laid out every piece of evidence. I described the cocktail's colorless sedative, the bottle Victoria hid behind cookbooks, the vial dropped into my sangria. I reminded them of the emails Victoria drafted to poison Emma's trust, the whispered rumors about Colin and other ex-fiancés, and the medical records showing her Xanax over prescriptions. Each time Victoria or Richard denied wrongdoing, accusing me of paranoia or manipulation, I queued up another clip on the TV. Victoria's hand trembling over the glass, Richard's cold shrug, their hushed strategy sessions. Their denials crumbled, cheeks paled, voices grew brittle. Halfway through, Emma's brother Owen leaned forward, eyes glistening. Mia gripped his hand. When I played the final video, Victoria boasting about planting divorce ideas in Emma's mind, Emma rose. Her voice rang out, unwavering. I love you both, but what you've done is unforgivable. You don't control my life anymore. Owen stood beside her. We're adults. We choose our own paths. Victoria burst into tears, less from regret than from panic at losing her grip. Richard's jaw dropped, as if struck by a revelation that his children had autonomy. As we gathered our things, I handed Richard a small USB drive. This is everything. Footage, emails, testimonies. Yours to keep. He arched an eyebrow. And why would you do that? I met his gaze evenly. Out of respect for Emma. I won't share this. Spreading it around would hurt her. But if you ever interfere again, copies will go to your country club, your business contacts, and your social circle. Consider it insurance. His smug expression flickered into something like respect. I underestimated you. Yes, I replied, as we turned to leave. You did. 6 months passed. Emma and Owen began therapy to unravel years of manipulation. Victoria and Richard kept their distance, checking in only with guarded, respectful texts. Then, over the holidays, an embossed invitation arrived, a fresh start, family dinner. Emma studied it at the kitchen table. Do you think we should go? I reached across and squeezed her hand. If you want to believe they've changed, then let's go. That night, a warm golden glow greeted us. Diane's kitchen smelled of cinnamon roast potatoes and spiced cider. Gerald met me at the door, genuinely curious about my photography projects. Over a dessert of pear tarts, he steered me into his study and poured a scotch. Mason, he began, voice smooth. I've been thinking about your future. Photography's treated you well, but have you considered joining my firm? Junior partner track, solid salary, benefits, stability. I lifted the glass but didn't sip. Why offer this now? I asked. His shoulders eased. Because I respect how you stood by my daughter. You protected her while holding your ground. That's strength. I set the glass down, gaze steady. I appreciate the gesture, but it feels like another attempt at control. You can't buy me or our marriage. His polite smile tightened into something brittle. Everyone has a price. I rose, heart clear. Not everyone, and certainly not me. Back in the living room, Diane flipped through old family albums with Emma, cooing, "Remember when you were happiest at home?" Emma caught my eye, and in that look I saw our future, two people forging their own path, unbound by others' designs. And with that, we knew exactly where we belonged, together, writing our own story. Part 5. I gave a slight nod, and Emma stood up. "Mom, Dad," she announced, voice clear and steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I have something to tell you." Every head turned, Owen's jaw dropped, Mia set her cup on the coffee table, and even Richard's smug smile faltered. "We're having a baby," Emma continued, her cheeks flushing with joy. "Mason and I, we're 3 months along." The silence that followed was electric. Then Victoria's mask cracked. Tears welled as she rushed forward, enveloping Emma in a fierce embrace. Richard approached more cautiously, eyes flicking between Emma's glowing face and mine. "Congratulations," he said, his tone stiff. "Thank you," I replied, leaning close so only he could hear. "This child will never be a pawn in your games. I promise you that." His expression hardened, but he gave a subtle nod, an unspoken acknowledgement that my warning had landed. On the drive home, Emma squeezed my hand. "They'll never change, will they?" she asked, the streetlights flickering over her worried eyes. "No," I said honestly, "but they'll have to accept us." 3 weeks later, a certified letter arrived on our doorstep. My pulse quickened as I read the return address, Richard's attorney. Inside was a deed to our rented house and trust documents establishing financial assets for our unborn child. No notes, no strings, just a clean, irrevocable transfer of property and funds. It wasn't an apology. Richard was incapable of that. Instead, it was the only form of acknowledgement I'd ever get. They recognized Emma and me as partners in their daughter's life. We'd won. Our daughter came in summer, and we named her Eliza after my grandmother. When Victoria and Richard visited the hospital, they arrived with gifts but maintained a respectful distance, no lectures on budgeting diapers or which retirement plan to choose. They held Eliza carefully under Emma's watchful eye, snapped a few photos, and quietly departed. In the months that followed, our relationship settled into something resembling normalcy. Victoria and Richard never apologized outright, but they stopped meddling in our marriage or undermining my work. One evening in early fall, I was in my studio editing a landscape series when Emma appeared in the doorway, Eliza cradled in her arms. "My mom called," she said softly. "She wants us to come for Christmas." I looked up from the screen, swirling a glass of water in my hand. "What do you think?" Emma settled onto a stool beside me, her free hand bouncing Eliza gently. "I think we should go, but on our terms. We'll stay at a hotel, not their house. We'll come and go as we please. And no unsupervised time with Eliza." I nodded. "Sounds reasonable." Emma smiled, the weight of past doubts lifting from her shoulders. "You know, I used to think success meant making my parents proud, fitting their mold. But now," she glanced down at Eliza, "success is making choices I can stand behind and loving the people who stand by me." 2 weeks before Christmas, a large envelope arrived from Richard's office. Inside was a glossy brochure, the company's annual report. My photographs, landscapes at dawn, candid portrait studies, architectural stills, filled its pages. Tucked inside was a brief note. "Hired the best photographer I know. Thought you'd want a copy." It wasn't forgiveness or a full reconciliation. It was respect, a recognition that I'd succeeded on my own terms. I didn't call to say thanks. We both understood this was about boundaries and mutual acknowledgement. That spring, I opened my own gallery in downtown Asheville. At the grand opening, Emma stood beside me, Eliza perched on her hip. My parents had flown in from Oregon, and friends and clients crowded the space, admiring the decades of work I'd poured my heart into. Toward the end of the evening, Victoria and Richard arrived. They moved quietly through the room. Victoria paused to hold Eliza under Emma's watchful eye, tears glinting in her own. Richard shook my hand, gestured to the photographs, and offered genuine praise. "Incredible work, Mason." No unsolicited advice, no proposals for mergers, just honest approval. Then they slipped out into the night. Later, as we locked up the gallery, Emma turned to me. "Do you think they've truly changed?" I paused, thinking of Victoria's careful bow in the hospital hallway, Richard's reluctant capitulation on the drive home that night. "No," I said finally, taking her hand. But they've accepted that they can't change us. And sometimes that's enough. That night, we sat on our porch swing, Eliza asleep upstairs. The mountain air was cool against our skin. I realized that I never won by matching their manipulations or playing their games. I won by refusing to play, by standing firm, protecting what mattered, and building a life defined by honesty and quiet persistence. In the end, the sweetest victory wasn't revenge. It was living well on my own terms, with the family I loved most right beside me. The end.